So I got involved in dust off day and night. I did gunship co-pilot work, did 71 strike missions. I had an uncle that did 103 bomber missions in World War II. So, you know, those sort of things were in your mind as things happened. And an awful lot of hash and trash. And after I'd been up there about 3 months, sometime in September, they said, okay, you're ready for your combat captaincy. So we'll do this over 3 days. You'll do a day flying 05 as if you were the captain. You'll do a day flying 04, and then you'll do a day 02, and we'll check you out and see how you go. So they actually had a program to build you up. And I did the first 2 days, and I was lining up for the combat captaincy check, and the Special Air Service decided they would stop operating that day. They didn't tell anyone in advance. They'd got all their patrols out. They said, okay, we're going home, so we're stopping operating. And the CO said, well, if there's no SAS operations, there's no such thing as a combat captaincy. So I spent the next 3 months as a combat co-pilot. Still enjoyed the hell out of the flying and that sort of stuff. And the guys would give me, my total captain time in Vietnam was about 10 minutes flying a Huey onto the Sydney for it to be brought home. So there's some aspects of that you go through. It was interesting. Come the end, there was a group who were selected to go onto the Sydney and travel with the aircraft. The aircraft were flown onto the Sydney and prepped, and then flown off at Townsville and then flown down to Amberley by that group of people and the maintainers and everybody else to do it. Everybody else, okay, you're flying home on what we call the Freedom Bird, a Qantas charter flight. So everybody would go on that, except for one person who had to act as the safe hand officer for the squadron safes with all the secret stuff to come home on a Hercules. And the person selected for that would always be the junior pilot officer. Guess who that was? So the guys on the Freedom Bird all left on the 16th, and I got my Herc out on the 17th, so I was the last 9 squadron pilot to leave Vietnam. Which, I don't know if we're telling funny stories, I guess they're funny stories. 35 Squadron, the Caribou guys, and us shared the mess and the accommodation, and there was a real camaraderie about it, but there was also a little bit of rivalry. There were only 4 Caribous and we had 16 Hueys, so there were I don't know, 45 or 50 of us 9 Squadron guys, and there were only about a dozen of the 35 Squadron guys. So it's pretty hard for them to have a big impact in the bar. You know, we'd get have a few, and we'd be putting them in their place because they were plank drivers, fixed wing, and things like that. You know, of course, when everybody left on the 16th, on the night of the 16th, there was how many helicopter pilots? 1. And how many Caribou pilots? All 12, and they weren't doing much flying, so there were only 2 of them that couldn't drink. So I got lined up and was not allowed to stop drinking. We finished about 2 o'clock in the morning, and when they woke me up to get me to the plane the next morning, I was still drunk. It was horrible. And they got me up and they said, well, you know, we're going to get you, you know, farewell 9 Squadron, come over to the mess. They used to serve these etherised fried eggs, so that fresh eggs in the States, and they had this system where they pumped a drop of ether into them so they could travel across and still be cracked fresh eggs, etherised eggs. I can almost taste it just there. And etherised eggs and champagne for breakfast at about 6 o'clock in the morning before I went down to get on the Herc. I think I slept on top of the safes, on top of the metal of the safes. I didn't feel anything for about 6 or 8 hours. And anyway, we came through Darwin. Getting through customs was interesting, but it all worked, and got to Amberley and handed over the squadron safes. My family was here in Brisbane, and I said, so how do I get home? And Adge, who'd signed for the so didn't anyone make any arrangements? And I said, well, I don't know. I'm a bloody pilot officer. And he said, oh, well, we'd have to think about that. And I thought, I know what to do. And I walked out the front and stuck my thumb out, so I hitchhiked home. And that's how I got home from Vietnam and knocked on the door. Mum was there. I'm home.